What if a house were not designed as shelter, but as discipline? What if domestic space were not shaped by comfort, decoration, or status, but by a strict internal logic, a moral geometry, and an almost mathematical restraint? And what if, in post-war America, at a moment when suburban houses were expanding outward, becoming softer, larger, and increasingly indulgent, one architect chose instead to compress, order, and limit space? Hold on to that idea, because the Kenneth and Phyllis Laurent House is not a house of generosity. It is not a house of abundance. It is not a house of ease. It is a house of control. Designed in 1949 by Frank Lloyd Wright in Rockford, Illinois, the Laurent House stands as one of the most disciplined and quietly radical domestic experiments of Wright's late career, not because it is expressive, but because it is constrained. Not because it expands outward, but because it turns inward. Not because it celebrates freedom, but because it redefines what freedom actually means. Post-war America was changing rapidly. World War II had ended. Industry was booming. The American suburb was taking form defined by lawns, garages, appliances, consumer comfort, and the promise of effortlessness. Architecture increasingly followed this trajectory. Houses grew larger, plans grew looser, space became a symbol of prosperity. But Kenneth Laurent did not fit this model. Laurent was a World War II veteran who had been paralyzed from the waist down. Together with his wife Phyllis, he approached Wright not simply for a house, but for a system and architecture that could be navigated, understood, and lived within with dignity. What they requested was not accommodation as an afterthought, but accessibility as a founding principle. Frank Lloyd Wright responded not with sentimentality, but with rigor. The Laurent House is designed as a hemicycle, a precise semicircular plan that organizes every space along a single, continuous arc. This is not a formal flourish. It is a spatial strategy. The curve eliminates corners, reduces unnecessary movement, and creates uninterrupted circulation. Every room is reachable without reversal. No space is accidental. No movement is wasted. The site itself is modest, flat, suburban, unremarkable, and Wright makes no attempt to dramatize it. There is no heroic sighting, no picturesque framing, no scenic manipulation. Instead, the house turns its back to the street and opens selectively to the garden, asserting privacy and internal order over external display. This is architecture as choreography. Wright's architectural thought process here is stripped of romance. Gone are the soaring cantilevers of Fallingwater. Gone is the expressive monumentality of his Prairie houses. What remains is distilled logic. Movement comes first. Form follows obedience. The curve governs everything. Ceiling heights are controlled. Materials are limited: brick, wood, concrete. The palette approaches austerity. Every decision reinforces continuity. Inside, living room, dining area, and kitchen flow seamlessly along the arc without thresholds or hierarchy. No room declares itself more important than another. There is no ceremonial axis, no symbolic center. The house does not stage domestic life, it accommodates it. Bedrooms, workspaces, and service areas are folded into the same geometry. There is no distinction between primary and secondary space. This is not a house that flatters, it is a house that functions. Crucially, wheelchair accessibility is not layered on afterward. Doorways are wide by design, floors are flush by default. Turning radii are embedded into the curve itself. There are no ramps added later, no compromises disguised as generosity. The house does not adapt to disability, it is defined by it. And yet, this is not a medical building. It is not institutional, it is not soft. The discipline of the plan produces dignity, autonomy, control. Wright insists here that independence does not come from excess space, but from intelligible space, from knowing exactly where you are, how to move, and what comes next. Light enters horizontally, filtered and deliberate. Windows are placed with restraint, avoiding spectacle or distraction. Views are not framed as scenery, but as orientation. The outside world is acknowledged without being invited in. The roofline remains low, pressing gently downward, reinforcing horizontality and containment. This is not architecture that lifts the body, it stabilizes it. Even furniture submits to the system. Built-in seating, desks, and storage curve with the wall. Nothing is loose. Nothing is arbitrary. The house behaves as a single organism, every element disciplined by the same logic. At a moment when American domestic architecture was becoming increasingly casual, indulgent, and expansive, the Laurent House offers the opposite: discipline as freedom. This is not Wright indulging his ego. This is Wright submitting to constraint. And that is precisely what makes the Laurent House radical. It proves that modern architecture does not need spectacle to be progressive. It does not need openness to be humane. It does not need abundance to be generous. It only needs clarity. The Laurent House was not designed to be admired from the outside. It was designed to be navigated from within. It is not a visual icon. It is a lived system. And it leaves us with a question modern architecture still struggles to answer. What if freedom comes not from having more space, but from understanding space completely? And this is where the story opens forward. Because the discipline we see in the Laurent House does not remain confined to the domestic interior. In 1949, modern architecture begins to turn outward away from the individual body and toward the collective one. From the controlled geometry of a single house, we move into the charged territory of education, youth, and social structure. In the next episode, we step into Smithton High School, 1949, by Allison and Peter Smithson, where architecture confronts a different challenge entirely: how to organize everyday life for a generation growing up after war. Here, modernism is no longer about domestic order, but about visibility, systems, discipline, and the ethics of public space. From Wright's curved interior logic, we move into the early formation of New Brutalism, where architecture stops sheltering the individual and begins shaping society. If this journey through the Kenneth and Phyllis Laurent House changed how you think about modern domestic architecture, subscribe to Space Shape and Scale. This channel isn't about famous buildings alone. It's about following ideas as they move from house to school, from private life to public responsibility. Leave your thoughts in the comments. Can restraint be liberating? Can limitation produce dignity? And where should architecture draw its hardest lines? Click the next video to continue the journey, because architecture never exists in isolation. It moves from house to school, from individual to society, and the questions only get sharper from here.